to the Transformational Podcast, a conversation between brothers about practical ways faith is impacting our lives. We invite you to join us on this journey as we are learning to let faith transform the way we live. We are glad you are with us today and look forward to sharing our journey with you. Now let's jump in. Okay, Chris, we're back at it, and if you're listening in real time, you got our last week's episode that was slightly out of order because we injected a kind of a last minute episode about where I'm at in the walk, and just to give a quick update, as of today, as we're recording this today, I have no idea. Interesting.
So would you say you're in the waiting right now?
Man, you and I both, right? It's pretty funny, right? And I guess God's telling me to wait patiently too. So here you go, right?
Yeah.
An interesting caveat to the story though, Chris, and we recorded that, and probably like 5 hours later, at the end of that day, the interview got canceled and got rescheduled. So if you're listening now, you probably won't know. Honestly, you won't know the results of that whole interview scheme until the new year, and that's unfortunate. So if you see me and you really want to know, you can ask me. But as of right now, I have no idea, because it's going to be after Christmas. So yeah. Speaking of which, Chris, this episode also releases just before Christmas. I thought it would be fun to tell people maybe our favorite Christmas movie, favorite Christmas memory, or perhaps even like, I don't know, most memorable. I don't know. Pick one out of time in history. I've got so many in my head rolling, but I'll let you go first.
Wow. I think just one of my favorite memories as a kid growing up was going to Gigi's house at Christmas time. Because I just remember when you walked in, she just went all out at Christmas with decor. And so it felt like you were walking into like Christmas Wonderland. It just, it just felt like Christmas was really here because, we're finally at Christmas, and she had some of the most unique decorations too. And so just, I don't know. There's something about Gigi's house growing up. That's our grandmother. If you didn't put that together.
Yeah.
And
no,
so that was
the food, right? All of that stuff.
Yep. That was probably one of mine.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was actually, it's funny when I say it, I kind of think about to when we came to the conclusion on our own that Santa wasn't real. So
wait,
hopefully,
what?
Yeah, right. Anyway, and we were, if you remember, we were snooping around out in the garage, and we found some of this air quotes Santa gifts, and of course then we had to pretend like we didn't know it and we didn't see it and all that other stuff. But I remember commiserating with you, going, "Hey, that's the Santa gift, Chris. Like that's the Santa gift." And so,
I remember what it was. It was the box. We found the box for the boom box I was getting at Christmas. That's exactly right. What it was. I still remember it. I remember what gift it was and everything.
The boom box.
I don't know if I don't think you ever did this, but I'm going to this is a first time confession. Mom and Dad are going to find out when they hear this podcast for the first time ever.
Yeah.
It just made me think about it. I remember one Christmas, it was the Christmas that we got skateboards, and we might have gotten the train set that year too. I woke up early and nobody was up. And I went into the living room and I checked out what everybody got. I checked it all out and I went back to the room and acted like I was asleep when Mom and Dad came in.
Never did it.
That's right. And then I acted surprised when I walked into the living room. So there's the confession. I still remember it.
I think we all have those stories, right? Yeah, I think we all have those stories. And so it's always funny to relive them. It is that time of the year. Hopefully our friends are going to go spend some time with family. Obviously it's not always a happy time for everybody. So we do pray that wherever you're at, the Lord's with you, and he's either having you have a really happy time with family or giving you the comfort and the support that you need during that time.
So along
Yeah,
those
go.
lines, though, yeah, I think it's funny this week, and we're gonna maybe just take a little bit of rabbit trail real quick. This week I'm teaching on joy,
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
and I think it's funny because joy is everywhere, right? You see it on
Yeah.
signs, on ornaments, and
I think it's
you know,
actually, yeah,
you,
it's right there. If you
there it
can't see
is
it in
right
the
there. Yeah.
background, it's up
So
on the, yeah.
so it's one of the primary decorations, but man, this time of the year it is easy to get to a place where it's like you don't have no clue where joy is other than the ornament on the tree, right?
Yeah,
Like
you
there's a
lost
very
joy a couple weeks ago.
and I'm gonna talk about this on Sunday, but this will come out after I preach, so it is what it is. But at the same time, it just makes me think there are a lot of people. We go through this tough time of the season for some people because there's been loss, there's been struggle, but then there's
Yeah,
the
man.
stress. I was sitting with my assistant the other day, and we were trying to juggle all the things. You got the end of the year stuff and the budget that you're working on for the next year, and um, plans for series, and then we're going through some working on expanding the facility so that we can
Yep.
make more room for those that God's bringing here. And man, I just said, man, I hate this time of the year. And I stopped myself and say, no, I don't. I love this time of the year. But it was interesting because in the moment,
Yeah.
I I didn't like I didn't have my focus set on the thing that brings joy. And um it just makes me think a lot about this time of the year is that we can so easily lose our
Get
joy
distracted.
because of social expectations. We
Yeah.
look around, see what everybody else is doing at Christmas, getting at
Mm-hmm.
Christmas, and dude, that'll steal your joy in a heartbeat, right?
Yeah, between
um
Instas and all the various social medias, man, it's easy to. And I honestly, I literally, Chris, it's funny you should bring this up because confession, like 2 days ago, I was thinking, man, I wish I could do more like that. And it doesn't matter what. But I was thinking to
yeah.
myself, Robert, you just totally got sucked into the whole social media wannabe, like get out of that. Basically, get out of your head. Stop that.
Well, and even for me, just right now in the waiting, um, early on, there's been days that we're with their in-laws and they're amazing, and it's really an amazing setup. But just going, man, God, I'm ready to have my own spot, my own
Yeah,
place. Like
right.
we're ready for
I'm
that
sure.
because, and I started thinking about it and I vocalized it this last week when I was talking to someone, and it was like as I vocalized it, I was like, that was it. Like I hadn't really thought about it. It's like
Yeah,
but it was
yeah,
almost like because we took the step of obedience that God told us to take, and
yeah,
we did that, we expected boom, 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 boom. This will happen next. This will happen next. This will happen next. But God never told us that. He just
yeah. No,
said,
he just told you to be obedient.
right, here's your next step. But in our minds, we played it out. So in the waiting, we so often lose our joy because of unmet expectations. And if you think about it, isn't that part of the struggle at Christmas,
Yeah,
right? The unmet
yeah,
expectations of, what well, you get married and you have the expectations you're juggling of the other families, right? And
yep,
and luckily
yep.
we have great in-laws and we
Dude,
really
God
have to
has
deal with
been
that,
right.
right?
Yeah, God's been good to us on that area where whether your in laws are very similar to my in laws, where the expectations are minimal, and
Yeah.
honestly, they're centered around Christ, and that's awesome. I think God's definitely blessed us in that area.
Yeah. So along those lines though, if you think about it, the original Christmas announcement was I bring you good news of great joy, right? This is like the original birth announcement, right? Nobody's outdone this one ever, all right?
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
let's go to it. Do you know where it is?
It's in
Like
Luke
we
2.
we now we have to go there
Sorry, Luke
because I
2.
do I do love this story.
Yeah.
And just to put a real quick pin in this because I think this is where we're going, like it or not today. Um, not even close to what we thought we were talking
No,
about
it's all
when we
right. We'll just
started.
keep traveling though.
No, I like it, but I love this story. Let's see where God takes it. Let's go.
So Luke 2, there were shepherds staying in fields nearby, guarding their flocks of sheep. That's what verse 8 says. Now I'm going to pause and just say, these shepherds, as I'm just getting to dig into it, there's a couple interesting things that scholars say about these shepherds that likely these were young men who often would sell themselves into slavery as shepherds because their fathers had died in war, or there was no family inheritance, so they went into it. Now, it could have been they grew up shepherding like David and his family guarding sheep, but a lot of times these shepherds would be seen as outcasts because they were,
even then it wasn't a highly sought after profession.
Right. But many of them would sell themselves into slavery just for survival. And so they were seen as unclean, outcasts. They were not high in the social status or social standing, right?
Well, Chris, they were living out in the fields, and I've done some living out in the fields before, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie to you. After a little bit of living out in the fields, you don't clean up as well as you do if you're not living out in the fields, right? And
right. So
yeah, I get it.
In the religious realm, then, because of the way that their religious system worked, they were considered unclean, right? They would not have been highly regarded. But at the same time, because they're guarding these sheep just outside of Bethlehem, many of the scholars believe this was a special flock, one of the primary flocks that people would come to get their sacrificial lambs for their purification ceremonies, and as they offered those to God, to cover their sins. And so they are guarding those sheep that people who despise them will come and buy from them to go offer as sacrifices. So even in the religious realm, they were outsiders, and not just because that's where you keep your sheep. You keep your sheep outside, but they were outsiders of their religious standing. There you go. There's a dad joke for you.
Ridiculous pastor joke. I appreciate that.
So they're guarding their sheep. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared among them, and radiance of the Lord's glory surrounded them. They were terrified, but the angel reassured them, "Don't be afraid. I bring you good news that will bring great joy to all people." That is the original birth announcement, right? An angel shows up in the middle of the night, scares these shepherds, these shepherds who've fended off lions and tigers and bears. Oh my! All right, they are tough guys. But the angel shows up, terrifies them. It would terrify anyone, right?
Yeah. But well, Chris, it's funny. One of the things, I don't know if we've talked about on the podcast, but I was talking about with some friends. One of the exercises sometimes I'll do on a Sunday is I'm having kind of that quiet time, is I'll sit there and I go, I wonder what it would have been like. And I enter myself into the thing. Like, for an example, I wonder what it would have been like hanging out with Jesus at night, right? He didn't have a house, so he's definitely a camper. They're around the campfire, right? Yeah. And so what would that be like? What would you be talking about, right? So if you put yourself for a second, into the field, these shepherds are probably, half of them are asleep. It's nighttime. And the others, now you're kind of stand and watch, right? You just have to somebody has to stay awake long enough to make sure the sheep are okay. And it's quiet. They've probably done this how many nights? Maybe
it's just their life, right?
A little chilly, they're looking for animals on the ground that are trying to get their sheep. They are definitely not expecting angels in the air.
No, right? No, not at all.
And could you imagine, put yourself in that position where I'm not going to lie, I think I'd be terrified too.
Yeah.
But oh man, how crazy. That's when you put yourself in that position in imagination, it was probably pretty amazing, pretty crazy.
And it's unexpected, right? It comes out of nowhere. Plans are changing in this moment. And I know that is part of the stress at Christmas, because things aren't going as expected, right?
Yeah.
Well, it goes
sometimes
on. Sometimes
in good ways, sometimes in bad ways, but yeah.
Yeah. So it says this announcement: the Savior, yes, the Messiah, the Lord, has been born today in Bethlehem, the city of David, and you will recognize him by the sign. You'll find a baby wrapped in snugly in strips of cloth, lying in a manger. And then he was joined by a host of angels. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to go back to verse 10. He says, I bring you good news that will bring great joy to all people. And I think it's interesting because, this time of the year, we celebrate joy, the idea of joy, but so often we fail to experience the joy of this time of the year, when that was part of the original announcement. It's not a big deal just because we hang an ornament that says joy on the tree. It's a big deal because that was part of the promise and part of the celebration of that original birth announcement. And so I kind of took a step back and started thinking, all right, these were likely Jewish men, young men.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they said the Savior, the Messiah is here, in their head, that maybe they wrote him off. Because here's the deal. They've been waiting for hundreds of years, and many of the Jews had written Jesus off, the Messiah, the one they were waiting for. They'd heard about it, but it become maybe myth, and just folklore. And yeah, we've heard about that, but they find themselves on the outside of the religious elite.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I kind of tried to, like you talk about, put yourself in it and go, man, there's a lot of times that maybe when you heard that announcement, you're going, wait a minute, do I even believe in that anymore? Right. But in that moment, all the things that was talked about since they were young, all of a sudden come to life and it becomes real. Now, here's what's interesting. They celebrate Jesus. The angel says, hey, this isn't just information, it's an invitation to go and find him for yourself, which I think is very important, because we've got to realize that you can know about Jesus but not know him, not experience
and that's actually
him.
That's actually was going to be one of my takeaways there, is they say, we bring you new or hang
Good
on,
news.
chill on the
Good
words.
news.
Yeah, thank you. Good news of great joy. What was that great joy?
Right.
It was that the Savior had arrived.
Right. The one that they'd waited
Jesus is here. That's right.
Which just for reference,
the great joy?
Yeah, for reference, it is referencing in a way Genesis 3, all the way back when Adam and Eve sinned, and God said, all right, here's the punishment of sin. But then he says, but one day I'll send someone who will crush the head of the enemy. That ultimately it was a promise to rescue them from the curse of sin. And that promise was reflected over and over. It was a promise made to Abraham that, hey, I'm going to make your name great, make you into a great nation, and through your family, I'm going to bless the world. Once again, it was the promise he made to Abraham, and you follow that. That promise is repeated, and they wait for. And the word Messiah in the Old Testament meant anointed one or appointed one. It's also the word we use for Christ. The anointed one, the appointed one. What does the anointed one mean? The one that God said would come, the one he promised would come. And so it was great joy because, listen, we all have a sin problem. It was a great joy that night, but it's a great joy today because we all have a problem that we can't fix. And so that night we celebrate the fact that God sent the one he promised to send, who would fix, who would ultimately take care of a problem we couldn't fix. And so that's the great joy, right? That's the reason for joy.
Yeah, and it's funny, if you could think about for a second, even the angel who got to tell that, I even think about that. Like, I put myself in the position of the shepherds who get to hear that message, but then I also think about the angel who got to deliver that message. How exciting that must have been, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so it's funny. I see you driving somewhere there, so
well,
I'll let you go.
I was just thinking through this idea of joy at Christmas, because here's the deal: the shepherds got to experience it, right?
Yep.
But you know who missed it largely? Many of them were the other Jews, right? The Jews that Jesus had come for. And why did they miss it? Because he didn't meet their expectations, right? They missed out on the joy because Jesus wasn't the strong political military leader who came that they were hoping for, that would come and overthrow the enemies of the Jews and establish an earthly kingdom, and that they would get to rule with them, and finally, all the wrongs would be righted in the physical realm, right?
I mean, you even see that in.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you're good.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say, you even see that in as even, and we may not jump here just right now. Maybe it's later, but anyway, you even see that in his arrest in the garden, right? In the sense that the disciples were ready to whip it on. I mean, they were kind of like, should we fight? But that wasn't Jesus wasn't meeting the expectation of being this conquering ruler in a physical sense. He came to conquer, make no mistake about it, and establish his kingdom, and he did. But he came to beat death, and he came to bring salvation and to usher in this new era of salvation through grace and faith in him.
Right. So they missed it because of missed unmet expectations, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't happening the way they wanted it to, where they expected it to. And the reality is in that reason why many of us struggle is because maybe we have unrealistic expectations. Maybe we have, you know, expectations that were just part of the way we were raised. I don't know, but so often I think that we need to open our hands and hold our expectations loosely when it comes to God and say, God, you know, here's the expectations, but if they don't align with what I should expect, God, will you change them? If they're just built on flesh and whatever. But here's what I thought about when it came to so if that's the struggle. The struggle is we get focused on the wrong thing. It makes me think of Hebrews chapter 12, where it says, since we're surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let's strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the
Yep.
sin that so easily trips us up. Let's run with endurance the race that God has set before us. But then he says this, we do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, or set before him, is what another one says. He
Yeah.
endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he's seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. It says, because of the joy awaiting him. And I started thinking about that. What was the joy? What was his focus on? What do you, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts, but was it the
Yeah, I mean,
joy?
if you think about it, it's that in and when you think about the Bible as a whole, right? And you're like, what is the Bible? It's about Jesus. It's about Jesus and the salvation plan for man. And so you kind of get this in the beginning, in this out of nothing creation, right?
Yeah,
Ex nihilo is the fancy word for that. And then you get to see a story that's weaved throughout the generations of his salvation work for man. And his joy is actually seeing that complete. It's seeing that the plan that they've pulled together. Now we still have revelations and Jesus is still coming back, but the
right,
joy that awaited him was a reunification back with his the triune God,
right.
and going into that glory, knowing that he's gonna that what he set out was successful. I mean, that's
Right.
kind of where my head was.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a lot. I think that's a large part of it. I think in that what he set out to do has now been accomplished. What he set out to do, to rescue mankind, right? Those he
Yep.
loved, loved the world so much, he sent Jesus to, right, so that anyone who believed him could be saved, right? And for the joy set before him. And I just kind of imagine this, right? We'll endure a lot of stuff, a lot of pain, if we believe the outcome is worth it, right? For example, if I go work out, I will endure the pain of working out because I feel as if, the other side of working out, feeling healthy, being stronger, whatever, that all of that is worth it. Then I'll
Yeah.
endure the pain for the other side of it. We'll endure a lot of pain if we believe what's on the other side is worth it, right? And I think about it
Absolutely.
like that from the standpoint of when he looked at the outcome of what he would have to do and what was on the other side. I have this picture, and I think it should stir joy inside of us, that when Jesus looked at the other side and said, I'm now, if I will go through this and I'll honor God in this way, on the other side, I'm going to get to reconnect mankind to the heart of God. That we are going to once again be able to, and it should stir joy in us that when Jesus looked at what he had to go through, he looked and said, listen, for them to be reconnected to God and experience the full life that we want for them, it's
Yep.
worth it. And so for the joy, and he didn't just say it's worth it as in begrudgingly, he said for the joy set before him, what he focused on was the bigger
Yeah.
picture. And so go ahead.
Well, I was going to say you can see it also in the first martyr. So when I
Yeah.
think of this, and you're talking about looking beyond what's coming, kind of thing,
Yeah.
and you think of Stephen, which is in Acts, it's a story of a apostle, and he's getting quizzed in front of the Jewish leaders, and he essentially walks them through the entire story of the Bible, the salvation story, God's plan,
Yeah.
the one we just talked about. It's probably one of the most succinct messages that ended in his stoning. And he, it ends with his stoning, and it's interesting because as they're stoning him, and it says in verse, this is 7, Chris, I'm in 7, 35, and I love this. It says, "But Stephen, full of the Holy Spirit, looked up to heaven and saw the glory of God and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. Look," he said, "I see heaven open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God." And at this, of course, they covered their ears. They got really mad, and they finished killing him. Um, and of course, while they were stoning him, Stephen, much like Jesus, in this moment says, "Lord, Jesus, receive my spirit." And then he fell at his knees. "Lord, do not hold this sin against them." When he said that, he ended up dying. And so the idea, you're right, Chris, it's that idea of looking beyond the current struggle into the reality of that eternal perspective.
Yeah.
And so, Jesus did that. Stephen did that. And so, yeah, I think that's when you mentioned, that's where my brain went.
So when I come back to just, we like to close loops, right? Coming back to it, it's like, all right, so if this season's supposed to be a season of joy, what do we do? How do we ensure it's a season of joy? And
I got
go for it.
I got an idea. Let's look at what the shepherds did, and let's take a lesson from that. So what did the shepherds do here in verse 15? "When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, 'Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about.' And so they hurry off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about the child, and all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them." And then, of course, "But Mary treasured these things in her heart." The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things that they had seen and which were told to them. And so what did the shepherds do?
They went and saw.
Yeah, they made a move.
They had, now, I think this is important because they had to leave where they were, and they had to leave business as usual to go and see and experience Jesus for himself. I think a lot of times, and also I think it's also important for us to realize that they went to Bethlehem and not Jerusalem. Now, you might say, why would you even say Jerusalem? Well, because that's where the Jews expected Jesus to be born. He was supposed to be a king. Royalty was supposed to be born in Jerusalem. That's where the capital city, to an affluent family. Like, if they'd have gone and where they expected Jesus to be born, they wouldn't have gone to Bethlehem. But they went.
They had a prophecy that put him in Bethlehem, which is why the Jewish leaders knew where to look for him.
Right.
But their expectation was that he would very quickly go to Jerusalem and become king. Like,
right. And so there was prophecy to be the city of David. However, many of the Jews still were looking for a royal line, royal priesthood, and they would reign. And they had to be willing to go and find Jesus on Jesus' terms, not on their own terms.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we miss the joy of following Jesus because many times we try to follow Jesus on our own terms, where we go, all right, I believe in you, Jesus, but this is all this means for me is that I'll go to church when it's convenient. I'll tip God, but by just giving a little bit of cash out of my pocket on the services I go to. I'll turn on worship music every now and then or whatever. The reality is that's really just religious behavior. Going and seeing and experiencing for yourself is saying, I'll surrender you every part of my life, and daily seeking him, daily saying, because that's the joy. That's the joy, is that we no longer have someone we have to go through to connect with God. That's what the Old Testament had to do. They had a priestly connection to God. They had to go through the high priest. Mm-hmm. Jesus came and said, no, you now have direct access, not just on Sunday, but every day, everywhere you go. If you want to experience the joy of Jesus in your life, it is available every day. The problem is that so often we just stay where we are rather than leaving where we are. Mm-hmm. Mentally, emotionally, and saying, okay, I want to follow Jesus. I want to know him more. I want to follow him more. So listening to scripture being read, but the Bible app will do that for you, right? Reading it for yourself, filling your mind, your heart with worship music. But the reality is we just say, all right, Jesus, we want you to save us.
Yeah.
But we leave it there.
Well, so just to kind of give like some action steps over the holidays, I'm gonna throw a few out wherever you think of. You could throw in there as well, because for me, just personally, I'll tell you one of the weaknesses I have over the holidays is it gets me a little bit out of my normal routine, and so I have a routine in the morning that you could probably put a mousetrap and I'd step in every one of them because I just step in the same spot every morning and the rest.
Yeah.
But here's a couple of things that we'll call it to-dos. Because while you can't earn grace, it's certainly not opposed to doing something. And so if you're looking for, well, what could I do? And I would tell you a couple things. One is read the actual stories that we just read. Read the birth stories, read the Christmas stories as a family, sit down and talk about them and actually do the same thing we just did. Imagining.
So Luke chapter 2, sit down, read it out loud, and and just put yourself in the story like that. Hey, if you have families with kiddos, have them act it out. I mean, it's a fun way to get them involved, and as you read it, have them act it out. It'd be a fun family thing together.
Absolutely. The other thing is, I would tell you, is to be intentional about, and I'm talking to myself here, so I'm just saying this: be intentional about spending time with the Lord.
Yeah.
Because it's not hard to sleep in and then miss your time with the Lord and then get in the busy part of the day. And then, and it's not bad things, right? It's you're hanging out with family, or maybe you're cooking, or maybe you're presenting or whatever. But you got to be intentional. You got to make time. And then I would tell you like kind of a third thing, and then I'll pass it over to you, Chris, is, this year, Christmas Eve is on Sunday. And so make a Christmas Eve service, whether it's in the morning or the evening. Go and have a time of fellowship with the believers to center your heart. Because if you miss that time and you miss the opportunities, then you're not like the shepherds. You're not. You're essentially religious activity. And so you're not going to him, and so to see him and whatever. And so if you can't make a Christmas Eve service, I get it. Sometimes, that's hard because it's just time dependent. I've been on travel, so sometimes it's not there. That may be your Luke 2 night. Okay.
Yeah.
That may be your Christmas Eve service.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, those are your action items, I'd say, coming out of this. And
here's the thing.
That will definitely focus your heart on joy.
With technology, you can log in and attend a Christmas Eve service online. And listen, if you don't have one to look for, we'd love you to join us at gf.church/watch. We'll have them all morning.
And Faith Bible on my side will have it.
Yeah, that's right.
Have it in the evening, and I'll be running sound. So if it sounds horrible, it's my fault.
We'll go all day. We'll go 8, 9:30, 11, 12:30, and then 2, 4, and 6. So get on one, check it out, celebrate Christmas. I think the other thing I would say is reflect on your reasons for joy daily.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Because we have a lot of reasons for joy. We get our focus in the wrong place. So really, it's kind of, when I go hunting, you're in your binoculars or whatever, and you have to fine tune that little thing sometimes to get it to focus in. Is that a tree branch or is that a buck? I can't tell, right? Especially when those early hours are, and there's always that
glasses. And
there's always that. Shut up! I'm good at seeing distance, but there's always that one bush when the light's coming up that you just convince yourself it's a huge buck.
That's right? A big one. Yep.
And you're over there trying to focus that. The reality is that in life we've got to constantly refocus our view, because there's so much that will distract us, that will distort what we're looking at in life, and will affect the way we feel. It will affect the way we think. It will affect our emotions. And so we have to listen. Those things don't focus themselves. I have to reach up there and do it myself. And sometimes I don't get it right away. It takes me a second. The reality is we've got to do that with our joy. We've got to sit there and go, listen, because here's the other thing, Rob, is that one of the things it says is that afterwards the shepherds went and shared what they'd
Yes.
heard and seen with everyone. Man, if we know about Jesus, we've experienced him, and we don't have any joy about it, who in the world would want to experience him for themselves, right?
Yeah.
Come and see Jesus. My life sucks, right? That nobody wants to be in part of that. But if we have joy, because we're like, listen, despite our troubles, despite the trials, my life's not easy, my life's not perfect, but I have joy because Jesus had been born, right? I have joy. Well, I want to know more about why you have joy, because you're
Yeah.
going through some stuff, but yet joy is bubbling up. Like, I've got to know more about that. That is a huge part of it, is understanding that, man, joy is really a celebration of that the world gets to see, and it can be an invitation for them to come and experience the joy of Christmas for themselves. So joy is a huge thing, and I think we should live with joy.
Yeah, man. I think I'll close this with a Bible verse that came to mind while we started talking to this, and I already looked up. It's 1 Thessalonians 5:16, and you may already even have it memorized. But I like it, and I want to I'll do a real quick pick it apart, but I'll do the thing. It says, "Be joyful always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus." And so it's be joyful always, meaning I personally believe joy is a choice. And it's a choice to, like you said, refocus, be intentional about having that focus right. It's praying continually. That's part of the refocusing. It's praying is focusing and refocusing our hearts and our heads in alignment with what God's plan is. And so there's less disappointment when we're doing that. And then it's that giving thanks part, right? And it's giving thanks and everything. And so we have this right off Thanksgiving. We were thankful. Now we're going to get some gifts, and we're going to be generous, I hope. And we have an opportunity to refocus our heart and be joyful always.
Right. Love it.
So do you have anything else, man?
Man, no, that's it. I'm just going to reemphasize. I love that. Joy is a choice. Choose joy. Hey,
so just admin as we close up for our friends who are still with us at this point in the podcast. We won't have an episode on Christmas Day, and it's not because we can't record one prior. It's just that I don't know that that's a great week to have one. But what we will do is we will have a January 1st episode, because we want to spend some time giving you what our strategies are for how we start a new year. It's nothing, I guess you could say, rocket science, but I love hearing how other people do their new year, just simply because I might be able to put another tool in the tool bag. So Chris will give you kind of what he does. I'll give you what I do, and that'll be our January 1st episode when we will be back. And so we definitely love the fact that y'all listen. We love the fact that y'all talk to us about it. And we hope that we'll get you back on January 1st.
Sounds great. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.